Welcome back to the PFF NFL show, here for a rookie review episode after week 6 in the NFL. Trevor Sikkema, Jon Ledyard here with you guys, and we are going to talk about rookies. There's some specific safety and slot usage that we're seeing with a lot of young guys, a lot of rookies around the NFL that we feel like is changing how teams are playing defenses. So we want to dig into some individual performances and check out how teams are using some of those young guys to change their defense. But we also want to check on the NFL draft order as well, because it's a rookie show, it's a draft show, so we're digging into that a little bit as well. Jon, how are we doing, my friend?
Doing great, man. It's going to be good to talk some drafts with you again. We've been talking like rookie prospects, but talking some draft again is something we haven't done. And now that we're a good chunk into this thing, into the season, and so now that we're there, we've got the opportunity to kind of look at the top 10 of the draft order, project who's actually going to be there, start thinking a little bit about, okay, what are the needs? Like, how do they line up with what the strengths and weaknesses of the draft are? And I think we'll get to more of like who's in the class and who could they fit. Maybe as the year goes on, we'll start touching on those things a little bit more. But today it'll be good just to kind of get a framework for what the lay of the land is, who we think's likely to end up in this top 10, and maybe where the quarterback needs are. Like, is a good starting point usually when we're talking about top 10.
Right. So we're going to take a look at the updated top 12, really, as it comes to the NFL draft. Like, if the draft were to end today, just to give you kind of guys a look at that. But we are, like Jon said, we're going to take a look at it more from an NFL perspective than necessarily a prospect perspective. We'll get into some mini mock drafts, some team needs, some prospects a little bit later in the year. Once we get to November, December, this will turn into a little bit of a draft show as much as a rookie show. But let's go, baby. Talking NFL draft with you like the old days. I love it. Let's pull it up right now. Let's get right to it. Let's look at the draft order as it stands today. This is from tankathon.com. If the NFL draft were happening this weekend, the New England Patriots would be picking number 1 overall. As you guys can see, there are 4 teams that are 1 and 5, the Cleveland Browns, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Carolina Panthers as well. But the strength of schedule, as you can see on the right, that is the tiebreaker there. So that's how we got to this order here. So any of those teams, I think, are in contention, certainly for the number 1 overall pick. We got 2 teams that have buys that are sitting here at 1 and 4, the Los Angeles Rams and the Tennessee Titans at number 5 and number 6. And then we have a bunch of teams that are 7 through 12. We can talk about, we'll just talk about the top 12 today. I was going to say top 10, but we might as well make it all the 2 and 4 teams. So the New York Jets, with their loss to the Buffalo Bills, now they're at 2 and 4. They're at number 7. The Cincinnati Bengals at number 8. The New Orleans Saints at number 9. Arizona Cardinals at 10. Las Vegas Raiders 11. And the New York Giants at 12. So, Jon, I just kind of want to throw it to you, man. I think the best way to do this is when you look at that list of teams that are within the top 12, what are the ones that you look at and go, okay, when the season's over, they're probably not picking, let's say, top 8, because we want to talk about bad teams here. So let's say, are there any of those teams that you look at on that list and you go, all right, they're going to be better than that record. They're not going to be picking in the top 5, top 8, something like that.
Well, let's look at these first 6, maybe, for these 1-win teams. Mm-hmm. Like, there's 6 1-win teams at this point, and then maybe we move to the 2 and 4s. It's a lot harder with the 2 and 4s because there are so many different stories there,
right?
That we can touch on pretty quickly, I think. But there's really are kind of separate categories, in my opinion. I think all of these 1-win teams, I mean, Jacksonville, perhaps their upcoming schedule is pretty brutal, and they seem like they're in disarray. Talent-wise, you'd say they're probably the most likely out of the first 4, maybe the 1 and 5 teams, to kind of crawl out of that position, at least get outside the top 5, maybe, with especially the incentive they probably have to win, keep their jobs. That probably leads them to maybe looking closer to the 8 to 12 range if they're going to end up here, which I think they'll still be in that range. But I think they're probably not going to finish in the top 5. The Patriots, the Browns, the way they're going, the Panthers, the Rams, they all have a pretty good chance. The Panthers, the Browns, the Patriots, let's just say, I think they all have a pretty good chance to end up in this range. The Rams are the one, to me, that I think they've been really competitive at the comeback win over the 49ers. Mm-hmm. I think they're way better than this. They've got the Raiders coming up after their bye week here. They get a little bit healthier, getting Cooper Kupp back. Puka Nacua, I think, will return at some point. So I do think that team, as they get healthier, will actually be sort of a force and work themselves back into the picture. Their upcoming schedule, not that tough. I mean, I think the Vikings game, that's a Thursday night game on a short week after they play the Raiders. That's going to be an interesting one. But if they can get past those guys, I think they can actually beat Seattle. I think they match up pretty well with them. The Dolphins are wilting, the Patriots after that. So the Saints down there a little bit further. I think the Eagles are far from what people hoped they would be before the season. So I actually think they can go on a little run here coming out of their bye week and get back into contention. The rest of these one-win teams, I think, are all destined to be picking somewhere in the top 10, probably even in the top 8. Maybe Jacksonville can get out of there, but I don't know that I see it just with the disarray that they're in.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Looking at these teams that are picking in the top 6, so New England, Cleveland, Jacksonville, Carolina, the Rams, and the Tennessee Titans there, the Rams to me are the team that's the odd team out. Like, they are competitive. They have a really good head coach. They have a great quarterback. They're going through a lot of injuries right now. You mentioned they get a little bit healthier. I don't think if the Rams are picking in the top 8, it's going to be like 8. Right? I think this is much more likely to be a team that is picking outside of the top 10. I think they're going to be too competitive. They have already played teams really tight, despite playing a lot of young guys on the defensive line and missing a lot of players on the offensive line and just offensive pass catchers overall. They'll figure it out. I think they'll string some wins together, and they're going to be competitive down the season. So I don't expect the Rams to be here when it's all said and done. Jacksonville, I don't think the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be a top 5 draft team when it's all said and done. There's just kind of like you mentioned, there's too much talent on this team, and I think they're in for a disappointing season no matter what. You're starting 1-5, obviously that's really bad, and it feels like they might be going through a coaching change at some point in time through the season unless things get drastically better. But I think that they'll probably be picking outside of the top 5 as well. I do have some faith in Tennessee, that Tennessee will be somewhat competitive, but
Really?
yeah, I mean, I still think that this could be a somewhat good group. They ran the ball better this past week, which I liked. The passing game is still definitely like in disarray, right? To use your word and what you were talking about with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not getting Calvin Ridley a target until week 8 this past week, and just everything looking all over the place still with Will Levis. I think that Levis...
That's what I worry about with them. Like, where do they win? You know, like, is the O-line good enough to win the way they want to win? We know the quarterback's not there yet. Like, they can't get the ball to their best playmakers. They can't rush the passer.
They ran the ball better this past week. And I think if they sort of lean more just into that, like, hey, Levis is not going to be the savior for us. And I think that we really need to dial it back with him. We need to run the ball a little bit better because that game was competitive to the end. And in fact, like, it was pretty close with the Indianapolis Colts. Now, really, one of the big differentiating factors was simply the fact that Joe Flacco and the experience that he had the one big-time throw late in the fourth quarter, which converted a first down, which was able to salt the game away, and that's really what did it for him. The Titans were right there, and I think they can be a competitive team. I look at them and I go, maybe they're not destined for a top 5 pick. Maybe it's a top 8 overall, but I don't know. For some reason, maybe I'm dumb. I still have faith that the Titans can play a little bit better football. It's hard to believe that about the Patriots. It's hard to believe that about the Cleveland Browns. It's hard to believe that about the Carolina Panthers. Like, these are 3 bad football teams that I don't know how much better they're going to be able to get this year. Cleveland's the one where it's just like, come on, man. Like, how is it this bad? The offensive line specifically, everybody wants to talk about Deshaun Watson. Deshaun hasn't been good. But, John, the offensive line, specifically with them going through a lot of the injuries, not having Wyatt Teller out there, not having Jack Conklin out there, I mean, Ethan Posey getting beat up. This is an offensive line that went from one of the best in the league, or at least we talked about them as one of the best in the league over the last 2 to 3 years. In our system, the only team that is grading worse on the offensive line than the Cleveland Browns right now is the New England Patriots. So they've got wholesale issues on the offensive side of the ball that go well beyond Deshaun Watson, and it's crazy to look at a team that I think on paper has a lot of talent that I just have so little faith in because of those reasons. So to me, I think the Rams are probably the most likely out of there. Jacksonville would probably be number 2 on that power ranking. Then I'm still intrigued by the Titans. The other 3, they're destined for a top 5 pick when it comes to April. But what about the teams?
A couple quick notes just on what you said.
Yeah.
Browns, completely agree. The protection issues they have, plus the player issues, it's sort of a double. Like, they have less talent because of the injuries. Some of their guys who are good, they missed the window. Like, they're not as good anymore. Just straight up, Joel Bitonio is just not as good, even if he's still solid. Like, he's not what he was, and so they missed the window kind of in the prime of a lot of those guys. And then injuries catch up with you. That's just the nature of the league. They had a window. though, and Watson wasn't good enough the last 2 years, and obviously him still not being good enough, even when healthy, has been a huge factor this season as well. He doesn't work well within the protection, and then the rules for the protection too. I think coaching deserves some blame too for what's gone on in Cleveland, and so it's kind of that when it's the disaster is that widespread. You're right. I don't see it getting better. Tennessee, interesting. Just to note on them, just so people are kind of aware, the Titans actually spent more money in total guarantees in free agency than any other team in the NFL. So it's we'll have to talk about another time maybe how those free agent signings are working out for them. But I thought the whole thing about the firing Vrabel was that they wanted to do a long-term rebuild. They may be in position to do that anyway, even after adding those players, because they are a one-win team. But we'll see if you're right and they can crawl out of the cellar here. I think of the next group, the 2 and 4 teams, it gets like really vastly different. Here are the Jets, who just traded for Devontae Adams today. Like, they have kind of all this incentive to continue to win, right? This is a team that absolutely feels like they're going to be back into the playoff picture. And I don't think they'll be a top 10 drafting team. So they're easy for me to get out of there because I think they've played okay. I think they're just a solid team. I don't think the Adams trade is going to put them in Super Bowl contention, which is where they want to be. But I also look at their schedule. It's not that hard coming up. I think that's a team that, to me, pretty clearly is going to get at least into like the 500 type of schedule range or type of record range. The Bengals have played better than their record. I think the Giants at 12 down there have played better than their record so far this season. We'll see where injuries leave them, but I think there's talent in those two spots to get more into the teens at least in the draft order. The rest of them, like the Raiders, I think will be the team that's most likely to fall into the top 5 as the Rams come out of there maybe. And then I think the other one that's interesting, I'm not sure where I fall on the Cardinals just yet, but I think the Saints are another one that could be they've lost 4 in a row. Rattler, it gives them some energy, I think. But I mean, here they are playing on a short week. They're pretty banged up against a really good Broncos defense. You know, if they lose that game, like, where does it go from here? Does Rattler go the rest of the way? Like, I just think they might be a team that ends up falling down into the top 5, which, considering where their cap's at, is sort of a very Titans-esque situation, except the Saints overall cap in future years is way worse than the Titans situation is, even as much as the Titans have spent recently. So that's one I would say like could be a sneaky top 5, sneaky pick to pick in the top 5.
Yeah, I mean, New Orleans was a team that, when you do those like bold call articles for every single team going into the season, I like to stay positive with it because you want to be able to look at the best in teams. But for New Orleans, the bold call that I had is that this team's picking in the top 5 in April. And you start off the season, you play really, really well against the Carolina Panthers, you play great against the Dallas Cowboys as well, and you go, okay, I guess the Saints are a lot better than what we thought, and things were going well. Certainly the offensive line, they've dealt with injuries, and there's reasons why they're on a 4-game skid. I understand that, but unfortunately the record is what it is. You played 2 really bad teams and you got wins, and then things started to unravel for you. Now your quarterback's missing a couple of weeks and you've already lost 4 games in a row. So for the New Orleans Saints, I don't really know, even if Derek Carr comes back, even if they get a couple of the guys injured along the offensive line that get to come back, I don't know if this team's just going to snap back into, okay, they're going to look exactly the way that they did against the Panthers and their defense, which we know about the Panthers now, against every other team in the league. So I think that New Orleans is certainly a sneaky team to get into that top 5. Las Vegas, probably the most likely, but I do agree with you. New Orleans is there. It seems harsh. I'm kind of losing faith with the Arizona Cardinals. Now I'm not saying that they can't play good football, but it is too up and down. It's way too much of a roller coaster, week to week, drive to drive. It's just there's too much of a roller coaster there. They have the ability to play extremely well some weeks, but they're just not stringing it together as much as they need to. And so we knew that it was going to be a multi-year for the Arizona Cardinals. You feel like 2025 is really the year for them to become legitimate contenders. And there were signs in the early weeks of this season that you went, maybe they're ahead of their schedule here. Maybe they're ahead of schedule when it comes to becoming one of those better teams in the NFL, maybe competing for a playoff spot. But it just feels like it's way too up and down at this point, where I don't think they're going to be picking within the top 5. But if you told me the Cardinals have a top 10 pick again this year, I wouldn't be shocked. So that's sort of my thoughts there. I agree. The Jets are going to be picking outside the top 10. The Bengals are going to be picking outside the top 10. Giants,
I'm like the last the Giants defender left, I feel like.
You
Whereas
are.
I
I mean,
actually
you
feel like
confidently said you were like, "Oh yeah, they're better than their record. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're all good. We're moving on.
I
There's no
just think they
discussion
should have.
here."
I think they should have beat Washington. If you look at the context of that game, we don't have to get into it now. And I think they were better than the Cowboys. I mean, I know part of this is just like Daniel Jones just didn't hit open deep balls, and he probably won't in the future too. Like that's a huge issue with them. But I just think they get Neighbors back. The defense is playing pretty well. The defensive line is a real force, and I think that
Getting
drives
better.
winning a lot in today's NFL. And Jones is bad, but he's not so bad. I think that like he's going to just make it impossible for them to win with, like maybe the Titans quarterback situation, for example. So I don't know that they'll make the playoffs, but I think they could pretty easily be 3-3 or 4-2 right now, and they've played more at that level of a team rather than like a top 8 drafting team.
Yeah. Yeah, this will be music to Giants fans' ears because Connor and I on the NFL Stock Exchange show, we were talking about
You guys said they're trash.
well, we were talking about like DEF CON ratings for like if your team needs a like where your team is basically, and like if you need a quarterback super badly. And we had that when we got to the Giants, we obviously said that like okay, like this is a DEF CON 1 situation. Like they need a quarterback badly, they're going to be drafting one. But then we sort of talked about their overall situation, and for me, if the Giants are picking in the top 5. I think that the season has gone so poorly to where like they're moving on from Brian Dable, they might be moving on from Joe Shane. Like it might just be hey, we're cleaning house here. It has not worked out. And the Giants fans have kind of gotten on me. They're like, why are you saying that we're going to fire Brian Dable? And I don't think they should fire Brian Dable. I just don't like if the season doesn't go the way you want it to. Yes, they're 2-4, and you could be like, whoa, they're only picking 12th in the draft. Well, that's because of strength of schedule. So if they continue to lose games, they're obviously going to be picking in the top 10. Maybe I'm way off there because I think that Brian Dable is a good coach, and I would love for the Giants not to fire him. I just don't know. Do they get another chance? Does the regime of Joe Shane and Brian Dable, do they get another chance to really make a decision on a quarterback? I know a lot of people are going to say like, oh, they didn't really have a decision on Daniel Jones, which could be the case, but the league's impatient. It's an impatient league, and so I never know. You defending the Giants at least is giving something else to that conversation because I would love for the Giants to keep Brian Dable. I just wonder if you're picking in the top 5, did your year go poorly enough to where you go, okay, everything here is just not working. We're moving on. I don't know.
I should have looked this up before the show. Maybe you can look it up. I'm trying to think of what your record would typically be if you're picking in the top 5 to 10 range, like how bad that would have been based on like maybe last season or so. But I just see the Giants as more of like a 7-win type of team. Like rather, if we're talking about them picking top 5, which you mentioned there, I would imagine you're talking about them winning like maybe 2 more games the rest of the way, being that kind of a team, 2 or 3 more games.
Right.
And I think they're going to do better than that. I don't think they're going to be above 500 probably at this point. They probably dug themselves too deep of a hole. But there's winnable. I mean, this Eagles game coming up is an interesting one, right? The Eagles have really been struggling. I think most people would say Philly's better than the Giants for sure, but they haven't really been playing to their talent for a long time now. Then you've got the Steelers. That way that defense is playing against the offense that the Steelers have. I think the Commanders will be tough, but the Panthers in the bye, and it's not an easy schedule to close necessarily, but like I said, I think they can get to 6 or 7 wins. Where would that put them based on last year's draft order?
I'm trying to look it up here. You would think that this is easier to look up than it is.
Like the records that they were last year in that order. Yeah.
Right.
Because they don't usually have I feel like you normally like a 4 or 5 win teams like in the top in the 5 to 8 range, like where you're like 5 to 6 win maybe would be in like the top 8 if you extend out that far, but maybe that's all they have is this. I think they're going to finish 7-10, so I think they'll win 5 the rest of the way. So maybe we aren't that far apart on them. Just looking at their schedule, I think they're more likely to finish 7-10, yeah, that 8-9 type of team than they are like a 5-win team. For example.
So the Panthers obviously picked number 1. They only won 2 games. They went 2-15. Washington's next. They went 4-13. The Patriots, same thing. They're 4-13. Yeah. Then you got the Cardinals, 4-13 as well. The Chargers were 5, and they went 5-12. So now you're getting into the 5. So the team picking number 5 overall still only won 5 games last year.
And did the Giants win 5 last year? 5 or 6 maybe last year?
Giants won 6.
6 last year. So yeah, I think they're a little better than last year. It with neighbors now. If they're healthy, I think they can get to 7 or 8 this season. The NFC's better too, and especially their division. Well, their division's more competitive. I don't know if it's better or not yet. We'll find out, I guess. Although I guess last year was disappointing for a lot of the season too. But I don't think they can. I don't think it's a lock they get blank. But like 2 losses to the Commanders, 2 losses to the Eagles, 2 losses to the Cowboys this season. I don't know that I see it as a biggest gap between those teams as has been in the past, and that's what gives me some hope the Giants can get to 7 or 8 wins.
All right, last thing I want to talk about before we get to a quick quarterback conversation, and then we'll get into some rookie review stuff in a little bit. Is there a team outside of the top 12 that you identify as like, yeah, I think this team is picking in the top, let's say 8. Doesn't have to be top 5, but is there a team outside of the top 12 of the ones that we highlighted that you go, yeah, I could definitely see this team picking within those top 8 teams?
I think if you're just looking like the easier select choices for this, I think Miami just like at 13, even like just their messaging on 2 is so vague, right? Like we expect them to come back at some point this season. Well, that doesn't sound close at all. Like, and they're just drawing completely dead with what they have now. They might be the worst team in the league with their current group right now. They just eked out one over the Patriots, but I think they're that bad. So they're an easy pick to be like, if Tua just doesn't come back this season, and so I mean they've already suffered a bunch of other injuries, then they could easily be a team that finishes in the top 5 to 8. I think Denver's the other one, just because I think their quarterback situation and their offense is really rough. Their defense is good, but that's hard to sustain that every single week. We already saw the Chargers kind of have some success, so we'll see if that's enough to keep them maybe outside the top 5. But I could see them getting into the top 10. And then if you're just going like, who's the long shots, you get down here into the teams in the 20s. That could end up in that range. Like Pittsburgh right now is at 27th in this order, and their offense is just objectively bad. I think defensively they're good, but they've had some injuries now. They really need their pass rush to be like the best in the NFL, and their D-line is the best in the NFL, I think, but their pass rush itself is more like a bottom of the top 10, keep in mind there, but that type of range. And I think that's fine, but just given the state of this team and how they're built, it needs to be the top end of that. And I don't think the coaching is maximizing their best group right now with the way that they're deploying players, how low the blitz rate is, lots of different things. And so I don't even see them leaning into their strength as much as they should. And so they would be the team to me. I don't think they're going to pick in the top 5 to 10, but if there's a chance for anybody in the 20s to fall that far, I think it would be probably Pittsburgh that falls out of it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Miami's not playing this week. They're on a bye. They were on the bye for week 6, and their strength of schedule is the lowest in the NFL right now. And yet they are 2-3. If they would be 2-4, if you would tie them with those teams that are picking 7 through 12, they would be picking at 7. So they would already be in the top 8. So I think that's obviously an easy projection to put them in the top 8. I agree. It's a massive struggle for the Miami Dolphins. I think they could be a top 5 team in the draft order when it's all said and done. And then the sneaky one that you didn't mention is Dallas. Like I think things are bad in Dallas. I think that this is a bad football team. I really do. So Dallas is one of those teams that I expected a little bit of a regression from them this year, from the double-digit win seasons that we've seen over the past couple of years with them. But I didn't think that it would look as bad as I feel like it does right now. And to me, it feels like Dallas is sort of like hanging on a thread of being a good team. And I think that there's a potential that it unravels for them. And I think that they could be in the top 8 when it's all said and done. I do. I kind of think that about the...
Have you seen the Cowboys schedule?
Is it brutal?
You ready for this? Let's close with this before we get to the rookie reviews.
Okay.
Bye week this week. 49ers, at Atlanta, who's playing better and better. Philly, Texans, at the Commanders, the way they're playing.
Yikes.
Short week playing the Giants, which, I mean, I think the Giants were pretty equal with them when they just played. The Bengals, who I think we both think is going to play better over the second half of the season. They have the first. Then the Panthers, then the Bucks, the Eagles, and the Commanders to finish the season. I mean, you're spot on, Trevor. This could be a 6-win team.
I think this is a 6-win team. I think this is a 6-win team.
It's possible. Yeah. 6 or 7 is not. Yeah, it's a good call.
Yeah, I think this is. Yeah, I think 6 wins. Obviously, they're picking in the top.
Look at the O-line. Look at the way the secondary's playing right now. The injuries they've had up front. It's very possible. Yeah, that's a good call.
Okay, so best part about football season, guys, it's all checking the post-game stats, right? Which wide receiver scored 2 touchdowns? Which quarterback threw for more or less than 300 yards? If you think that you could pick what's going to happen before kickoff, you got to check out Pick 6 from DraftKings, an official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. Download the Pick 6 or the DraftKings Pick Six app. Now, select between 2 to 6 players if they choose, and then you just choose if they have more or less than a single stat. That is it. And here you go. For the first bet for new customers, you play just $5 on your first Pick Six set, and you get $50 in Pick Six credits for free right there. Maybe you think we're crazy. Maybe you think the Dallas Cowboys are about to have an absolute offensive explosion. You go, no. We're getting more on every single number. CeeDee Lamb's numbers, Dak Prescott's numbers, Rico Dowdle's numbers, right? You think that we're crazy. Or maybe if you think that we're right and you think it's going to be less for all those guys, there you go. That's your Pick Six set. Download the new DraftKings Pick Six app now. Use the promo code PFF. That's promo code PFF for new customers to play just $5 on your first Pick Six set and get 50 in Pick Six credits. Only on DraftKings Pick Six. The crown is yours. If you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problems with gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Pick Six not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Non-withdrawable Pick Six credits expire within 6 months. Limited time offer. See terms at picksix.draftkings.com/promos. Real quick before we jump into some of the rookie performances, I did want to look at the draft order one more time and just be like, okay, quarterbacks. Who are we looking at? Like obvious quarterback teams. Because like the Patriots are picking at the very top. They got Drake May, so I think they're good there. Cleveland. The only lifeboat they have from the Deshaun Watson situation, in my opinion, is to draft a quarterback. Get a quarterback on a cap-controlled rookie contract and just eat the Deshaun dead money. So I think Cleveland's in there. Carolina's obviously in there. Well, maybe not obviously. I don't know. Maybe you think that Bryce should get another chance. But I think Carolina's in there.
They're there.
Okay, all right, they're there. To me, like Rams are sneaky, right?
Yeah, you can't count the Rams out of it for sure. When you pick this high and you have Stafford and as old as he is, and yeah, I think you can't count them out.
And then the other two that I would highlight are Vegas at 11, obviously, and then Miami. We don't know what's going on with Tua at 13. I think that those are the. Do you see anybody else, or do you feel strongly about those as well?
Well, Tennessee, I think will be in there for sure. Like
Tennessee,
it just doesn't seem like it's going well with Levis, and so I think there'll be another one that looks. But yeah, this isn't last year. We have 6 in the top 13 last year. Is that right? Am I remembering that right? 6 in top 14 or something like that. Anyway, 6 in the top half. For sure.
In the top 11.
That's not going to happen this year, Trevor.
I think it was the top 11.
So was it top 11?
Yeah.
McCarthy was.
Because the Raiders, I thought the Raiders picked it.
For the Broncos 13. Anyway, that is not going to happen this year. Right. So you are like, I don't think you're going to have the same wealth at the position just in this draft. And we won't get in a ton of prospect evaluations today because we don't have time. But that's just very unlikely to happen. So you're going to see some moves. You're going to see some free agent situations. Hopefully you don't see too many Raider situations where, because Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew is all we got. But it's going to be tough. And there's going to be some guys starting in some places that shouldn't be. And that's the reality of the league every year now at this point, is that you've got a couple teams that just don't have any way to answer it.
Yep.
Which is a separate conversation we really don't have time for today. You have to wonder at some point, if you're a bad team, how much more important does tanking become? Because think about just in the logistics of getting a Jaden Daniels and the way he's playing right now, and like one win can swing something one way or another. And if a team like that could have been in that range could have tanked 2 more games and shut down their guys and not won 2 more games, would that have been a possibility for them? Anyway, long team building discussion that has pluses and minuses to it. I totally understand that, but I think that is. Those kind of crossroads are before teams like the Raiders and this trade of Devontae Adams right now, where they have absolutely no hope of a quarterback on their current roster. They have to find a way to get up into that top 5, maybe even get to 1 and their way to get a quarterback, even if it's via trade, to make that happen. If New England holds that spot and already has a quarterback, that could be a possibility. And if you're a team that already has a quarterback like the Patriots, so much power in being number 1. The Bears have shown that, right? This can jumpstart the rebuild of a franchise with tons of assets because you've got that highly coveted pick. So huge to be able to be picking in that range. And so it's going to be one of the most important things for a franchise like the Raiders to finish out the season, and like Tennessee probably too.
Yep. No, I agree. I agree with all those points. It's going to be interesting to sort of like review this draft order as we go throughout the season and see what changes. Obviously, we're only 6 weeks in, so every win and loss is kind of, it's all right there. But teams are definitely going to start to separate themselves, and that quarterback picture is going to get a little bit more clear. We're going to see the team needs for certain organizations really ramp up, and then of course, like Jon said, we'll get into prospects as we kind of go on throughout the season here. But we do want to talk about some guys that are in the NFL currently. Jon and I were having conversations, sort of like planning the show, what we want to talk about, and this safety class last year, I think at this time, we looked at it and we went, not really a great safety group, right? I mean, we went into the season, we were like, all right, well, like Cam Kinchins could be pretty good from Miami, and Kalen Bullock from USC, and Tyler Nubin from Minnesota. But then, kind of as the season played on, Kalen Bullock, he really struggled in run defense, and Cam Kinchins just was not the same player that he was over the previous 2 years at Miami. I thought Tyler Nubin was good, but he sort of solidified himself as one of the only safeties that you maybe loved in this safety class. And now we're seeing a lot of guys be able to step up and already shine early on in the NFL season. Jon, I'll give you dealer's choice. We're talking about safeties, but just slot defenders overall here from this past class, the rookies that are playing well. Who do you want to start with? Who do you want to talk about and highlight here from this rookie class of those positions?
Well, yeah, you said it. I mean, it just wasn't hyped up very much before the draft. And a lot of the guys that are playing well now were really under the radar before the draft. And so I think we start with two of these nickel guys who I think come from pretty different backgrounds. I think a lot of people had Tyke Smith for the Bucks sort of evaluated as an actual safety going into the draft. I watched him and I saw him as one of the better nickel prospects, and I was a really big fan of Tyke Smith. I actually thought it was the Bucks' best draft pick, and it's looking like it so far. I mean, he was outstanding again this past week in week 6, 3 pressures on 6 rushes. He was a really big part of the game plan in disrupting Spencer Rattler in the pocket. As the game went on, the Bucs used him as a blitzer. They used him off the edge as Rattler would boot to kind of help contain and things like that. He's great he's been great in zone coverage all season, a very zone heavy scheme, and so the fit has been pretty good. The interception he had was kind of thrown right to him at the end of the game. It was kind of an interesting situation. He was in such good position in zone coverage that the throw never should have actually happened at all. So I got to give him extra credit, even though the interception itself was so easy. So the fact that Rattler still threw it was just like, what in the world? Like, he was in front of the guy the entire play. Normally when you see those interceptions out on the edge, it's the guy jumping a route. Not in this case. He was in front of the receiver the entire play. And so that was a just kind of, again, a great sign of knowing where you're supposed to be in coverage and continuing to be in the right position. Been a big plus for Tyke Smith. He had a forced fumble. He almost forced another one. At first it was called a fumble, and then they said the receiver didn't have control, but so he broke that pass up, had 2 stops. He's great in the run game. He's been, whether it's stuff in the box where he's coming off the edge and he's able to get the back on the ground, or it's stuff out on the perimeter, he has to weave through blocks or take on blocks. He's been a real plus. And then Andrew Phillips for the Giants has been pretty similar. Like, it's been both watching these two guys excel. Phillips was more of an outside corner, but then when his measurables came in and he was shorter than expected and just didn't have the size as expected as an outside corner, teams maybe started to view him as a nickel, at least the Giants did. And it's funny because he's not a very big guy. He's kind of got a lanky frame. He's about, I would say, probably 10 to 15 pounds lighter than Tyke Smith, depending on at what point you take their measurables. But he plays like a linebacker with that type of physicality when he's around the line of scrimmage in the box. He's fearless. He'll run fill between the tackles and take on blocks. He flipped a pulling Amarius Mims over his shoulder on Sunday night when he was filling in between the box, and just has been really, really good in the run game. Great in terms of his responsibilities, right? Like in the coverage and as a zone defender, there is so much for this position to process, and this position has become so critical around the league because so many teams obviously playing in nickel now, even more teams playing in dime now. These players have to be so much better against the run. They have to be edge setters. You have to be able to take on blocks on the perimeter where you're seeing bigger slots. The position has just changed so much over the years in terms of before it was like, oh, cover the smallest wide receiver on the other team. Okay, right. Done. Now there's just so much more involved. Almost every team is playing so much heavier zone coverage than man. And so you've got to play basically like a linebacker, sometimes like an edge defender. Now everybody's blitzing this position. So you have to be able to be blocks 1v1. And so guys who can do all that stuff are just complete game changer type of players. We saw with Brian Branch last year, and now he's playing more traditional safety, but his versatility to be able to do everything is so critical. And I think Phillips is is very similar to just like he has unbelievable feel for the game and so few mental mistakes with Phillips and with Smith, I think are really like big perks this season. So can't say enough about how good both guys have been. They've both been huge answers to prayer for these defenses, guys who needed a player in this specific role, this specific position, and they were able to get him without spending a first round pick on it.
Yeah, and I think that I think the run defense part of this is really important, because when we talk about corners and safeties, it's we want to hear about coverage, all right? The passes defended, the interceptions, we all want to talk about coverage. But I had this conversation last year when we were talking about some of these slot safety, corner, hybrid types of players, and a lot of times people go like, okay, well, like you mentioned with Andrew Phillips, and I'm not saying like this is wrong, this is kind of what the Giants did and it worked out, and I'll explain that in a second. You look at a guy and you go, all right, he's not as big or as long as we want for an outside corner, so let's just move him in the inside. And it worked for Andrew Phillips because he can defend the run. It doesn't work like that for all corners. It's not like, oh, this guy's too small to play on the outside, let's just move him in the slot. Because you mentioned, and I'm glad that you did, you're not just covering the team's number 3 receiver anymore. You're not just covering their small slot receiver anymore. Not only will they throw a lot of options at you in the passing game, most importantly, if you are a slot defender, you are closer to the line of scrimmage. You have to fit the run. Like, you're part of the run fit. Normally, when you're in nickel, you're taking a linebacker off the field and you're subbing them with another defensive back to play in that position. So you're just trying to get more speed on the field and match up with their wide receivers. You still then have to defend the run. It's a numbers game. And the guys that allow you to stay, even numbers-wise in the run are really, really important. And when you look at Tyke Smith, for example, I looked this up. On plays that are first and second down of 7 yards or more. So, like 1st and 10, 2nd and 10, but it can even be like 2nd and 7, things like that. Running situations where there is a good threat to run here in those situations. The Bucs specifically played nickel or dime or something where there are not 3 linebackers on the field. They played nickel 59% of the time last year, 59.8% of the time in those situations. This year, they are all playing nickel at almost 10% higher at 68.2%. To me, that's a Tyke Smith stat. That is we feel like we can play. Now, obviously, there's been some injuries, like Savasier Dennis has been hurt and like all that kinds of stuff. Like, I get it. But to me, that is Todd Bowles and the defense saying, we have confidence that we can fit the run with Tyke Smith out there, so why would we take him off the field? There's no reason. He gives us the plus in the passing game because he's a better mover, and he will help us in the run game as well. It's the same thing with Andrew Phillips, who I liked Andrew Phillips as an outside corner. I really did. And when the Giants drafted him, I said, okay, well, now you got Deonte Banks on one side, you got Andrew Phillips on the other. That's a really good man coverage, feisty cornerback duo on the outside. And then the Giants said almost immediately, nope, he's playing slot for us. And I went, okay, I don't know if I love it, but now I love it because you see how ferocious he is defending the run. How he doesn't care to put his body on the line. He'll do whatever he needs to do. You mentioned like sometimes fitting between the tackles as well. Who he is as a run defender absolutely allows me to think that, yeah, a move to the slot was the right move for Andrew Phillips. So to me, when you get a good slot player like this, you are sort of changing the math in your favor, because it used to be about sacrifice, right? Like, okay, well, I'm getting that extra speed on the field, but I can't really fit the run. Now we are seeing the development of these safety, slot corner, hybrid players to where less and less, when teams hit it at this position, they don't have to feel like they're sacrificing size or speed or one way or the other when it comes to switching between base and nickel. So to me, especially that stat that I read about the Bucs with Tyke Smith, it's a math type of a statistic that these guys are improving for their defense.
Absolutely. And for the Bucs specifically, they're a good example of it. And the Giants, some of this is true as well, but the Bucs will play always 2 linebackers, right? That doesn't change for Tampa, but they will play 5 down linemen. And so now, because of what the percentage increase you're talking about, they're able to go, oh, we're going to go 4-man front, which is way more modern, right? And way more effective in terms of how teams are trying to get to the quarterback these days. We're comfortable going more 4-man front on these situations. And then when our zone coverage package opens up, Tyke Smith is able to to take away more of the field than maybe Christian Izien did last year, or whoever they have had in the slot, Sean Murphy Bunting in the past, like that did in past iterations of this defense. And so it is really critical because of what they're able to give you in coverage, what you're able to get to in terms of your front, and now you can play in a little bit more modern of a way there, and you don't necessarily have to just play like one guy in every gap up front or whatever. You can be a little more flexible in how you operate things, and you've got way more speed at the second level now, which is big because they don't have a lot in their linebackers right now with David aging and KJ Britt there. So that area is still an area of concern for them, but certainly what Tyke Smith's able to bring helps alleviate that to some degree. And Phillips is, I mean, what I've loved about Phillips, I don't even see, like when I watch him on tape, he hasn't been tested as much as Tyke Smith, who's been targeted a ton, and you've been able to see kind of his fortitude and everything. Phillips has not been thrown at very often this season. He's only has 14 targets. I think Tyke Smith's been targeted like 37 times. And Phillips also missed a game, maybe two, with an injury, but he's only surrendered 48 yards on 10 completions this season per PFF. So it's pretty crazy. Like he's just allowed nothing after the catch, been a sure tackler, kept everything in front of him. Everything you could have asked for, he's done so far this season. So that position, playing just a nickel position and being on the field as much as those guys are really, really important. So is being able to play safety and move around and do a bunch of different things too. And this class was not supposed to be a good true safety class at all. And we've already seen a lot of guys playing. We're not even going to talk maybe a ton about some of the guys who've played the most today. We're going to talk about two guys who I know we're going to start with talking about at least two guys who have just now recently started to play more in Evan Williams and Malik Mustafa, but like Kalen Bullock, Tyler Nubin,
right?
And like some of these guys have been playing like a ton. Javon Bullard started the year for the Packers. They've got two rookie safeties, him and Williams, that are playing a ton this season for their defense. So all three of those guys have been playing like most of the season, and now you've got Evan Williams coming in and playing a big role, Mustafa coming in and starting for the 49ers with Hufanga injured, like, and both those guys playing at high level. So all of a sudden you've got five safeties, and yeah, Nubin's had tough moments, Bullock's had tough moments this season, no doubt about that. Bullard even has had some tough moments, but none of these guys look like totally out of place, and they all look like they've got a role potentially as a starter in the NFL. So it's been a pretty big, nice surprise at the safety position to see this much contribution early on too.
Yeah, and before we do get into that, we'll get into that safety class, and like I think how they're being deployed is very, very interesting, and like putting these guys in early positions to succeed with their strength. But before we get to that, this podcast is brought to you by Cherry Bundy. It is the drink that is fueling the Healthlete revolution. Natural products and ingredients, no added sugar. I had one of these bad boys after a workout yesterday. It was fantastic. It was great. I mean, it gives you the taste that you love. I said a couple of weeks ago when I tried it for the first time, I don't know how they're doing it. It tastes fantastic. The charred cherries, you think that it's too sour, but it's absolutely not. It's perfect. They're high in antioxidants. They got natural inflammatory to help with, recovery, soreness. They'll help with sleep as well. They help boost the immunity as well. That's why almost 500 collegiate and professional sports teams are using Cherry Bundy's products. It's not just the recovery stuff too. You can see they've got the gel packs as well if you're kind of like on the go and you like that better than just a regular drink. They've got the sleep version. They've got the protein version. So you can check out all this good stuff. 10 out of the last 11 Super Bowl champs have used it. 66 out of 67 of the Power 4 conference teams all use it. Every single NCAA football and national champion since 2007 has been using this product, and you can too. No matter how much of an active lifestyle you have, check them out. Products are available at Amazon, cherrybundy.com. Retailers like Publix, Kroger, things like that. So check it out. Check if you can find it. They've got those three different products that you should check out. The protein one, the sleep one, the pure recovery. Like there's a lot of different stuff. Whatever you're looking for. Again, if you have an active lifestyle at all whatsoever, check out cherrybundy.com. These safeties, Evan Williams from the Green Bay Packers, and specifically Malik Mustafa. I know those are the two guys that we want to hit today. Williams is not just the highest graded rookie safety, he's the highest graded safety over the last 3 weeks because of what he's been able to do. You talk about Xavier McKinney's impact and how he had 5 interceptions in a row to start the season this week. He didn't have an interception, but it's because Evan Williams got the interception this past week, so he stole one from him, which could have been a record-tying one. Sounds like not a great teammate to me, but all right. So what do you think about either of these guys? Williams, Mustafa, where do you want to start here? Who do you want to talk about when highlighting this safety class?
Well, Williams has just really impressed me, and Mustafa's not quite played. He unfortunately was just 20 snaps in week 6 because of an injury. I definitely want to talk about him because he was my safety one coming in, and I really think I think he looks great But Williams is kind of off the radar for me. As you know, I don't scout necessarily 300 guys like I used to most of the time for this anymore, although hopefully there'll be more this year. But yeah, I mean, Williams was a guy I didn't really watch a lot. And then I looked at his testing numbers and he wasn't that big. And then he ran a 4.6 140. I think that was in like the 30s percentiles for safety, basically. But just watching him play, he doesn't look like he runs 4.61 at all. Like he looks completely, his range is awesome. So
field
some
speed,
of it is
field
just
speed
like,
versus combine speed. That's what everybody who wants to counter their combine speed will say to you.
it is really crazy to watch him because his processing's so fast. He plays with such urgency, and I think that's maybe the best phrase for just like an explosive mover in his first couple steps. That was probably indicated he did have great jumps, and so maybe some of that was in there. But his range is really really good. I mean, he's really run to the ball well, made plays as a center fielder, gotten over in time to make plays. His punch out in this game just to make a play like that, and basically he played a little bit in the first couple weeks of the season, but the last 2 weeks are really when he's like actually like stepped up and been, looked like a real piece of this defense and played a much higher snap count. Last 2 weeks they've moved Javon Bullard to the slot. He's played more there. Keyshawn Nix is kicked outside now that Jair Alexander's back, and Eric Stokes was really, really struggling. So they've shuffled in the secondary. He's not played a ton of football with these guys yet at this point, and yet the communications, the rotations, the Packers love to move their safeties post-snap. He has come down and been a middle of the field underneath zone defender and closed on the ball and tackled really well in space. His flow from the opposite hash, from one hash to the opposite sideline, has been really impressive. Just really quick diagnostics, very quick to get on his horse and get sideline to sideline in his pursuit. He makes a lot of plays that way. But yeah, the processing of route combinations and staying on top of his assignments has been absolutely the number one thing with Williams. And then even the maturation from week 5 to week 6, 2 missed tackles in week 5. Thought they were fine missed tackles in terms of like he was playing fast, he was hitting guys, slowing them down, teammates were getting there. That to me is way preferable than staying in your spot 8 yards downfield and catching a guy and having him run over you for 3 or 4 more yards. Like I think sometimes we overrate missed tackles without the context of the tape. But even that, I think he fixed some of that even going into week 6. The Cardinals ran a zone read and Kyler kept the ball and Williams came off the edge, and instead of kind of overrunning it and just being out of control, over aggressive, he throttled down, tracked with Kyler, and tackled him in the backfield for a big stop. I think it was on 3rd down maybe. And so that was just a highlight of like how he's improving already as a player to be as aggressive as he is, but also play really under control. So yeah, I think he's been a really nice wake up. And how about for the Packers, like getting him and Edgerrin Cooper in there more the last couple of weeks? They can cover on 3rd down. Like they don't have to worry about all these liabilities anymore. They're finally putting out their best players, and they're getting a lot of really good play out of their young guys.
Yeah, obviously it's been a little bit disappointing with their pass rush, but there's so many other things that I feel like are going well for the Packers defense with Jeff Hafley, and so you're even able to play a little bit better last week when we saw with their pass rush. So I think that there's a lot more juice left to squeeze for this Packers defense, and I think the rookies are a big reason why. When I watched Evan Williams, it was kind of the same thing. The way that he was coming downhill and adjusting to space and calculating space and how to get there exactly when the ball is going to get there, or how do I cut off this receiver, how do I truly play on the back end as a single high or a two deep safety stuff, like that was really great for him. That feel for deep coverage is an underrated part of his game right now. And you're right. You look at the missed tackles. Yeah, he's over pursuing the tackles a little bit. There are times when like he's kind of grasping at air with the arms. But like you said, you'd rather have that, and that kind of brings it into the next guy that we want to talk about here, Malik Mustafa, and somebody that when I watched him coming out of Wake Forest, yeah, there was some deep coverage stuff. I feel like he was a little bit stiff in the hips to actually be able to get sideline to sideline the way that I know he's linearly a great athlete. And sometimes you just didn't see that with deep coverage because I didn't love his feel for space. I felt like he sort of questioned it a little bit. It wasn't like, okay, I've got a great feel for it. I'm putting my foot in the ground. I'm going. I've got the fluidity in my hips to be able to change direction and get where I need to go. Some of that was a little bit spotty. It was hot and cold for him in deep coverage. But one thing you could not deny from Malik Mustafa is that he was going to come down with bad intentions. He was going to come in as a box safety and be able to hit you, especially if he had good momentum. He could play at the linebacker level. You could blitz him off of the edge. And you could tell that that's sort of what the 49ers are wanting him to do. They'll play play him a lot at that deep safety because I think that they're very comfortable having him come down from depth to be an added run defender. And so they'll let him play that deep safety as a single high safety, or they can kind of bring him up and let him blitz, be a really good contributing player at the linebacker level. Sometimes you'll see him miss a tackle here and there because he gets a little bit over aggressive. But like you said, you want that mentality, especially from a defensive back. And so Malik Mustafa has been sort of, I should say, put in a great situation to where his strengths can shine here with the San Francisco 49ers. You said he was your safety one? He was your top safety in last year's class? Or was it like top box safety? What was it last year for him?
No, he was my top safety overall, and I only got to watch like 5 probably safeties in last year's class. It wasn't, again, I sort of go off of all of you people who've been doing this year round, and you're like, oh, these are the guys to watch, and I kind of try to watch the players that are high on the consensus board, for example. By the way, Evan Milt Williams, 197 on Arif Hassan's consensus board of all these big boards by NFL analysts. So I didn't watch him pre-draft. Again, like, y'all led me wrong. You know what I mean? Like that, I could just blame everybody else for not having watched guys that I should have. But Mustafa was 124 and Tyke Smith was 125. And I find that really interesting as part of this discussion. And I know we're getting close to wrapping up here, and I don't want to get too philosophical with it. But if you look even the last couple of years at like a lot of the guys, and there hasn't been like a great safety class, I think, or a couple of years, I'd have to go back and double check. But, you know, I don't want to put everything in a 1 year sample size. But some of the safety rankings now, if you look, like it's been interesting to see players that were really valued. It seems like the draft community at least has had a hard time coming off of maybe some of the guys who got more hype throughout the year, even if the pre-draft process may have revealed they weren't quite that as good as they thought. Now we're early into this thing, so that isn't to say guys like Jaden Hicks and Cole Bishop, who are the 3rd and 4th consensus safeties in the class, can't come out and be like way better in future years in their career. I mean, Hicks has barely even played this season. I believe Bishop's just started to get in the lineup. Cameron Kinchins, who was the number 6 safety, you know, that isn't to say that he can't eventually become like a good player in the league, but it seems like some of those, I know going into the year, those guys were top guys, and then people didn't move off them as much as they should have when guys like Mustafa and perhaps Williams, I can't say for sure, but Mustafa and Tyke Smith had really good tape, even if their names had kind of flown under the radar. I was like, oh, their tape's pretty good. Their testing's pretty good. And for Mustafa, yeah, I mean, just being in the right position a lot of the time on tape so far has been really, really big. The 2 overthrown balls by Gino in the 20 snaps that he played, he picked one off, right? Coming over as a single high guy, picked one off, tracked the ball really well, made a good catch. The other, he was ready to make a play at the catch point. He was closing on the receiver, and the ball ended up being too high for everyone on that one. But he kind of had the reputation, like you said, as a straight box guy, run defender. He's going to fill really quickly. He's going to hammer people. He's a great tackler, one of the best form tacklers in the entire class. So I still see him as filling all of those roles. And I think the one thing you want to see with him is the processing speed going to continue to be fast for him. That was how he played in college. He played really fast. And it's a beat or two in the run game before he's, I need to get in there. I need to fill. And so I think that stuff's going to be key for him. When the ball goes to the edges, he's pretty good. He's getting some pursuit pretty quickly. But you got to fill in the box a lot as a deep safety, especially if you're playing in a too high shell. And so in those situations, how he plays is going to be really big. Right now, the 49ers are asking him to be I mean, he's not played that much, but they're asking him to play a lot of the high stuff. And Jair Brown's sort of been the one he's going down in the slot or playing a little bit more in the box. And so we'll see how that develops as he plays more. If he feels more comfortable, hey, you're a better tackle. Jair's a better free safety. A lot of people thought Brown was more of a free safety coming out of that class. So how they use those guys, I think, is going to be interesting moving forward. But Mustafa, we just started to see it, and the last couple of games, and I think it's been really good results so far. You're seeing all the traits you hoped would show up, and then you're seeing some good stuff in coverage too, even ability to play single high a little bit. And I don't think a lot of people maybe pegged him as that pre-draft, so it's been encouraging.
Follow all of his fantastic work over at the Audibles and Analytics Substack, as well as the Audibles and Analytics podcast that he does with Ollie Conley. Also does a Read Optional podcast with Ollie as well. So if you don't get enough of Jon and Ollie here on the PFF channel, which you shouldn't because they're giving a lot of really great information, not just on the topics that we're talking about here, but the entire league, go check them out at the Substack and make sure you're subscribing to it. Appreciate everybody watching and listening to the show. We'll be checking back in on the NFL draft order and NFL rookie performances every single week, specifically same time next week. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That's Jon Ledyard. We'll see you guys then. Thanks for watching.